الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة الصلاة القائمة وسيلة وبعث مقام المحمول الذي إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, one of his prayers was, Allahumma in katabtani shaqiyan famhuni waktubni sa'ida. Oh Allah, if you have recorded me to be one of the sad ones, then erase me and make me one of the happy ones. And in the hadith of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu an, the famous hadith where he describes, or the Prophet ﷺ describes, the phases that the fetus goes through. And it mentions at the end of the first 120 days, he says, an angel is sent to the fetus, or rather it accompanies the fetus and brings down along with it فيؤمر بأربع كلمات بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أو سعيد. It is commissioned with four things: to record or attach its lifespan, provision, the nature of his work, and whether or not he will be sad or happy. And so the ulama, they differ about this. What does it mean to be sad and what does it mean to be happy? Some of them say is to live a happy life means to live as a Muslim. And to be happy, or rather to be sad, rather, it means to live in a state of unbelief, a non-Muslim. Others say, no, to be happy means to die a Muslim, to die a believer. And to be sad means to die an unbeliever, and ultimately ending in the hellfire. So when Abdullah bin Umar, he makes this prayer, he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of his infinite knowledge, because ultimately Allah knows what the final end will be for all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember, he records what our fate will be in the hereafter. And he places that in the eternal, we saw the sort of the eternal record, we call the Lawh al-Mahfuz, that what is written with conditions. In other words, that you shall die as a believer as long as you don't do this, or as long as you do that. But if you do that thing, then it'll change, and then this will be your fate. So this is why Abdullah bin Umar, he understood. And so if you have me recorded in your eternal book as being someone who will be sad, then erase that and replace it. Make me one who will be happy. Make me one of the happy ones. Now, we often think of being happy means, of course, to have the dunya, to be able to enjoy life, to amass a lot of wealth, to have a nice home, to have a nice car, to have a beautiful family, to live in safety, be able to travel wherever we want, and we'll be happy. But if that was the case, then we wouldn't have masajid, right? What's the point in coming to the masjid? If all of your happiness is found right at home. It's because, of course, enough of us, regardless of how much material success we have, eventually it grows, but then also it becomes old, and then we want something new. But the hunger for knowledge of God is part of the fitrah of the human being. That is our nature, is that we hunger for greater knowledge and understanding of why we are here. What is the big deal? What's the whole purpose of this universe and creation? And what's my connection to it? Is there life after death? Why? Because happiness can't be found in the material things that we have been given and we amass. There was a time in human history, not only for Muslims, but pretty much all the great civilizations, when they spoke of happiness, they understood that to mean that you live a life of virtue. A life of virtue. And I don't mean sort of just simply living and doing good things from time to time. But in other words, to live prepared and poised and desirous of the opportunity to do something good to someone. Because that's really what it means to be virtuous. If you're a millionaire and you sign a check for $100,000, $100,000 is probably like $100 for a lot of people. It's just $100. Bismillah. Of course, those of us who are not rich, we say, subhanallah, very generous gift. But if it was easy for you, you're probably not really a generous person. Generous people are the people who are like, they kind of, sometimes you struggle with it. And then you just beat yourself and you give, you sacrifice. And then you make it a habit. Every single day you give more and more. And then, this person is generous. In other words, that the pursuit or the fundamental goal, even of fasting itself, is to become people of virtue. In other words, there's a difference between me doing a good act and me wanting to do a good act, even when I don't have the opportunity. If I want to do a good act when I don't have the opportunity, then I'm a virtuous person. I may be waiting from some great, I don't know, some repayment of a debt or some big cash payout. And I might say to myself, you know what, once I get that money, I'm going to give this much to Zaytech. And then you die before it all happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect you as someone who gave whatever that amount was to Zaytech. Why? Because that's the way Allah rewards. And in the same way, if a person says, well, you know what? I see all these nice Teslas outside, and you know what? When nobody's paying attention, I'm going to break into one of those Teslas. I'm going to steal it. And they try. They can't get in. They say, well, I'll come back later on. Then they walk out in the street. They get hit by a Tesla. And they die. When they're resurrected as what? Someone who stole a Tesla. Why? Because there was resolve in my heart. I'm going to do this evil. I know it's wrong. I'm going to do it anyway. And I couldn't do it before because of certain things, but barring the capacity of me doing so. But my intention, my plan was to come back. That's the way Allah rewards. So that person is what we call a person of vice, a vicious person. So you can do a bad act. Doesn't necessarily make you a vicious person. All of us do bad things out of weakness. But there's some people, they're just waiting for the opportunity. Like people who are rapists, for instance. They're waiting for the opportunity to rape. Right? So Ramadan is about training us on how to become people of virtue. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You know, that's what it's about. It's become people of taqwa. Some people who want to do good even when we don't have the opportunity. Now, Mu'adh bin Jabal, radiallahu an, on one occasion he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He asked him, Ya Rasulullah, dullani ala amalin yudkhiluni al-jannata wa yuba'iduni an an-nar. Tell me about a deed I can do which will help me enter Jannah and will keep me far away from the hellfire. And the Prophet's response, you asked about something enormous, something huge. But it is easy for anyone that Allah makes it easy for. And he gave him some simple direction. Ta'budullah wa la tushriku bihi shay'a. You shall serve God and don't associate any partners with him. وَتُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. And you establish the prayer. وَتُؤْتِ الزَّكَاةِ. You pay your zakat. وَتُصُومُ رَمَضَانَ. وَتُحِجُّ الْبَيْتِ. You fast Ramadan and you will make the Hajj. But then the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to teach him something even better. He said, أَلَا أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى أَبْوَابِ الْخَيْرِ. Shall I not direct you towards the gateways of goodness? Or we say the gateways of virtue. And he says, Bala ya Rasulullah, of course. He said, As-sawmu junnah. Fasting is a shield. وَالصَّدَقَةُ تُطْفِئُ الْخَطِيئَةَ كَمَا يُطْفِئُ الْمَاءُ النَّارِ. And charity, it extinguishes sin in the same way that water extinguishes fire. وَصَلَاةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي جَوْفِ اللَّيْلِ. And the prayer that a person makes in the middle of the night. So in other words, the gateways of goodness are fasting, they're charity, they're tahajjud. And in all three cases, what you do, you sacrifice something. You sacrifice food, drink, and your bodily pleasures. In charity, of course, you're sacrificing your attachment to whatever that piece of property was. And in tahajjud, you're sacrificing sleep. So these are gateways of goodness. You want to become a person with virtue, then incorporate these things into your life. Now, Mu'adh bin Jabal was a very special companion because we know he was one of the direct students of the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. We probably all remember Mu'adh from the famous hadith of when the Prophet was sending him to Yemen. He said, how will you judge when a matter is presented to you? say, I'll judge by the book of God. And if not there, then by the sunnah. And if not in the sunnah, then I will exert my mind and not be neglectful. Ashtahidu ra'yi wa la alu. Mu'adh bin Jabal, when he first met the Prophet ﷺ, he was only 18 years old. And Mu'adh, he died very young. On top of that, he was 38, 20 years later. But Mu'adh bin Jabal was a happy person. He was a person who pursued virtue. And when he prayed tahajjud, one of his prayers he would make at the beginning of tahajjud was, Allahumma namat al-uyun wa gharat al-nujum wa anta hayyun qayyum. So Allah, the eyes have fallen asleep. In other words, other people. Everyone's asleep now. Wa gharat al-nujum. The stars have disappeared. Wa anta hayyun qayyum. And you are the living, the self-subsisting. Allahumma talabi al-jannata bati. Oh Allah, my pursuit of Jannah is slow. Wa harabi min an-nari da'if. And my flight from the fire, it is weak. And then he prays, Allahumma ij'alni indaka hudan tarudduhu ilayya yawm al-qiyamah. Allahumma ij'alni indaka hudan tarudduhu ilayya yawm al-qiyamah. So Allah, please make for me a guidance which you shall give back to me or restore to me on the day of judgment. That's what he would pray. Mu'adh bin Jabal, radiallahu anhu, the Prophet said of Mu'adh, وَأَعْلَمُكُمْ بِالْحَلَالِ وَحَرَامِ Mu'adh bin Jabal. The most knowledgeable of you of the lawful and prohibited is Mu'adh bin Jabal. He also said of him, he says, Mu'adh imam al-ulama'i yawm al-qiyamah bi rusbatin or rusbatain. Said that Mu'adh is the imam, the leader of the scholars on the day of resurrection by 1 or 2 paces. That Mu'adh will lead the ulama into Jannah, insha'Allah. Mu'adh bin Jabal, he was attached, of course, dispatched by the Prophet ﷺ to Yemen, as we know. And prior to being dispatched to Yemen, one of the things that happened was that Mu'adh, he was afflicted with a lot of debt. Extremely indebted person. It's one of his flaws. He became extremely indebted. So one day, all of his creditors, they showed up demanding payment. It's time to pay up. Mu'adh, he stayed at home. He didn't come out the house. And they were outside of his house screaming for him. And the Prophet, he heard it, what's going on here? What's happening? Ya Rasulullah, he owes us this. He owes us that. He owes us this. And then the Prophet forced Mu'adh to come out the house. And he asked Mu'adh, okay, do you have payment for this? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I only have what you see. And then the Prophet, he liquidated all of Mu'adh's wealth at that moment. He was bankrupt. Everything was taken from him. And they didn't cover all of his debts. Only about 5/7 of what he owed was covered. And then some of them, they forgave him. Okay, you don't owe us anything. Others said, no, we want what you owe us. And then the Prophet told them, you get nothing more than this. Now, the Prophet said that didn't mean that he wasn't allowing them to retrieve their rights in the future. Right? If Mu'adh became rich or gained some wealth in the future, he had to repay what was owed to them, or the remainder, what was left. So when the Prophet ﷺ was bidding farewell to Mu'adh at this particular moment, sending him off to Yemen, one of the things he told him was that it was permissible for him to accept gifts, even though he's one of the emissaries of the Prophet ﷺ and would be the judge and, of course, the teacher of the people of Yemen at the time. And this, of course, is uncommon because people who are in the government are not supposed to accept gifts because it's taken as a sign of like a bribe, right? But the Prophet allowed it for Mu'adh because he understood Mu'adh's state, that he was not a corrupt person. But he also told him that by the time you return to Medina, you probably were returning to my grave. And of course, when Mu'adh heard this, he began to cry because he knew that this was really, really the last time he would see the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. So he goes, and then after a year or so, Mu'adh returns during the reign of Abu Bakr Siddiq, radiallahu anh. Mu'adh now is a rich man. He has anything that anyone can want. He even has slaves. So he's having a conversation with Umar ibn Khattab, and he notices, Umar starts to notice there are these men, these people, they're sort of standing around Mu'adh, and they're coming to him and taking things and bringing things back. And Umar says, well, what's this? Umar's concern is that with Mu'adh, he abused his position. They say, well, you're in position, you're not supposed to be taking gifts and things like that. So he says to Mu'adh, he says, did you ask Abu Bakr, could you keep these people? And so Mu'adh said, well, why would I ask Abu Bakr? They belong to me. They're mine, it's my property. I don't need permission from the governor to keep what I rightfully own. So Mu'adh that night, he had a dream. And in that dream, he was over a pit of fire. And he was starting to fall into the fire. But then someone grabbed him around his waist and pulled him out so he didn't fall. And when he turned around and looked, it was Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu. That next day, because by this time his slaves, they had become Muslim. So when they would pray, Mu'adh would lead them in prayer. So they prayed, and at the end of the prayer, he turned around to them and said to them, who did you just pray to? And they said, we prayed to Allah. And he said to them, Antariqu antum lah. Said, go, you're free to go. You belong to him. You belong to God. So you're free now. You're free men. This is Mu'adh, again, a happy man. That's what happy men look like. And one occasion, Umar ibn Khattab he had gathered a number of his own disciples together, and he said to them, Tamanno. He said, make a wish. And then pretty much all of them said, okay, well, I wish we had wealth that could fill this room. And we can take that wealth and we can give it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Umar ibn Khattab said, for me, I wish I had more people like Mu'adh bin Jabal, Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, and Hudhayfa ibn Yaman, so that I could employ them in my government. He says, I'm going to show you why. So what does Umar do? Umar, he goes out, he gets some wealth and he gives it to Abu Ubaidah. He gives some to Mu'adh. And he says to his friends, he says, watch what they do. Abu Ubaidah, he goes and gives away everything that he was given by Umar. Mu'adh, he gives away everything that Umar gave him as well. And then Umar says, didn't I tell you? In other words, there is no Islam without Muslims. And it's because of these type of people that Islam spread and why Islam became the majority religion of so many countries around the world. These are people who sacrifice so much for us. These were happy people, and that's what happiness looks like. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us happy people. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات. أستغفر الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. One final story before concluding about Mu'adh bin Jabal. As I mentioned, he was only 38 when he passed away. And the occasion of his passing was what is called the plague of Amwas, Ta'un Amwas. This was in year 18 after the Hijrah, in the region of Sham. We know Syria and the surrounding areas that we call the Levant today. It was a plague that it's said to kill up about 30,000 people had died in this plague. And Mu'adh had by this time grown weary of life, right? In the fitan, all the fitna that he had experienced. So he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would give him and his family a portion of this plague. He prayed for death. And we're not supposed to pray for death unless either one, we have certainty of our deeds, or we fear the fitna of dying as kuffar. So Mu'adh made this prayer. He had 2 wives. Both of his wives died. His son, Abdurrahman, he died. And then finally, Mu'adh, he passed away. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us benefit from this time that He's given us on this earth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us people who pursue virtue. We come to Allah broken. We come to Allah broken. We ask Allah to bless us and fix us as well in the process. In Ramadan and fasting are some of those ways that we have been fixed, inshaAllah. اللهم أنت الأول فليس قبلك شيء وأنت الآخر فليس بعدك شيء وأنت الظاهر فليس فوقك شيء وأنت الباطن فليس دونك شيء اللهم اقضِ عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارحم محمدا وآل محمد كما صليت ورحمت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات واغفر لنا اللهم معهم بفضلك وإحسانك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم آت أنفسنا تقواها وزكيها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا اللهم تقبل منا قيامنا اللهم تقبل منا صدقاتنا اللهم تقبل منا أعمالنا الصالحة يا رب العالمين اللهم تقبل منا قراءتنا بالقرآن في هذا الشهر المبارك يا رب العالمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب النار وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقيم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله استووا واعتدلوا يرحمكم الله استغفر الله الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات. فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين. فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له، وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصم. ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر، ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى، وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى، ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى، ووجدك ضالا فهدى، ووجدك عائلا فأغنى. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر، وأما السائل فلا تنهر، وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a few quick announcements. At 3 p.m. today with Dr. Abdullah, we'll have a session in the studio titled Islamic Virtue Ethics. Starts at 3 o'clock, it ends around 4 p.m. And then, as you guys may know, we have the community iftar tonight at 6 p.m. So try to arrive by 6 p.m. I haven't checked in the last, or we haven't checked in the last 2 hours, but last time we checked, we're at 95% capacity. So if you have not RSVP'd or registered, please try to do so as soon as possible. And then we have a program on Sunday. The time will be announced very soon with Sheikh Redwan Tafsir program. It'll happen on Sunday around 12, between 12 and 2. The flyer will be sent out soon. And then we have a halaqah for the sisters on the 16th and the 23rd at 12 p.m. So 16th and 23rd at 12 p.m. You can find this on the WhatsApp group and also on the app itself. And then we also have, as you guys may know, we have the Tarawih prayer every night at 8 p.m. Just keep in mind on Sunday, it will change to 9 p.m. due to the time change. So on Sunday, Tarawih will start at 9 p.m. or Isha prayer will start at 9, followed by the Tarawih prayer. And then Qiyamul Layl will be done by the youth, alhamdulillah, which will happen from March 20th to March 29th, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., and then 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. The first three hours will be 3 juz every night, and then from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. will be the salah. So make sure you guys join us for those dates as well. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for your time.